All right, I'll get us started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today. Today's webinar topic is Beyond Finance, Unleashing the Full Potential of Oracle Essbase Across Your Organization. During this informative session, we will review the principles of Oracle Essbase along with various use cases for Essbase and strategies for increasing the adoption. Please feel free throughout the session to post questions in the Q&A section of Zoom, and we will leave some time to answer those at the end of today's presentation. Today's panel includes Eric Noren, Senior Application Architect, and Steve Sheeky, Director of Business Development. I will now hand it over to Steve to dive right in with today's material.
All right, thanks, Alicia, and good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate you all hopping on. I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes just either refamiliarizing yourself or just introducing you to IARC and what we are all about. So we are a service organization. Obviously, we're proud to say that our services and our solutions we've been offering for like the last 10 years right now. We're in our 10th year of operation, so we're very proud of that. We have a team of onshore certified architects, engineers, consultants. They've been servicing all of our clients globally with decades of experience in EPM, BI, and cloud technology arenas. We offer a full advisory, design, implementation, delivery of EPM, BI, on-premise cloud solutions, and continuing on through 24/7 day 2 support offerings. We're also an Oracle certified cloud cell build and service partner, as well as holding partner certifications in cloud providers and other technologies like OCI, Rackware, Azure, and AWS. And so why should you consider IARC for your project? I'd say the first one is probably our experience. The majority of our staff are previous Oracle Hyperion consultants at all levels, senior, director, and above. The average tenure, like I mentioned, is we're very experienced. It's pretty much over 20 years for all of our Essbase, EPM, hands-on technologists working in the industry for, like I said, over 20 years. And then for those of you who are either on or thinking of moving to OCI, we've also been engaged with OCI since pre-Gen 1 and other technology providers, like I mentioned on the previous slide, for over a decade. Second, probably certifications. So all of our engineers hold certifications in OCI from professional architect level, security, DevOps, databases, and others. All of our consultants hold current certifications for all the Oracle EPM applications. And we also have multiple certified Rackware architects and engineers within our organization, as well as one acknowledged Oracle ACE on staff. Next, probably I would say we're kind of a go-to firm. Everyone comes to us. We're the experts with the most tenure and experience. So our stream of subcontractor work is pretty extensive. We're probably one of the last surviving infrastructure focused, certified on OCI, Oracle, EPM, Hyperion, Essbase firms left right now. There were many, most of them have either closed up shop or merged with others. And like I mentioned earlier, we just hit our 10th year and we don't think we've peaked yet. And then lastly, probably, we're happy to help through the situation from pre-sales all the way through sales, through delivery, all the way through managed services. We kind of do this for a living, right? So we understand that some of the landscape just navigating, going from sales to implementation or upgrade of projects, dealing with IT and finance and the relationships, we kind of understand that, we thrive on that, and I'd say we probably consider ourselves sort of like the business IT translators. So now maybe we can take a little bit of time going through some of our customers and partners. So at IARC, we pride ourselves with our client and partner relationships. If you look above on the left, there's a sampling of some of our clients. On the right, some of our partners like the Oracles, IBM, Deloitte's, Accordions, Applied OLAP, Wycent, a lot of partners that we work with. We work with clients across every industry, every vertical from public to private sector. We are often sought out by our partners in channel solutions to be their onshore architects and boots on the ground for pretty much all things EPM, BI, cloud solutioning. We're proud to say we have 100% return rate for all our direct clients, and we're listed as one of the top 5 rated service providers on Oracle's own service marketplace. So we truly don't sell only our consulting services. We thrive to build relationships. And now, having gone through that, let's get on with the content of today's webinar. So I imagine most of the audience is probably familiar with Oracle Essbase, but just to make sure, I'd like to take a few minutes to review the basic principles of Essbase. So depending on when someone first started using Essbase, they may or may not remember the early humble beginnings and how it basically created its own new technology market. So Eric, would you mind just taking a few minutes to kind of walk us through that, remind us all, and discuss what you see as the overall fundamental principles of Essbase?
Absolutely. So first of all, Essbase is a portmanteau of extended spreadsheet database, just like what you're seeing in the left pane of this slide. Most relational databases are designed with transaction processing in mind, right? So Essbase, though, uses OLAP technology, which is optimized for processing human queries. The calculation, aggregation, and roll-up capabilities, along with that business logic engine, is very powerful. And again, it's built with human queries in mind. Finally, everybody loves spreadsheets, and the ad hoc capability with the Excel Smart View add-in is pretty much unmatched. And then finally, I'll just say a little bit about security. The security can actually be set all the way down to the most atomic level of detail in each of those dimensions that we set up in an application.
All right, thanks for the summary, Eric. And that's a good lead into our first poll question to make sure everybody's out there and alive and well. So what version of Oracle Essbase are you currently using?
1 second. We'll give another 5 seconds and then end the poll.
Actually got the you got the final polling question popped up, not the first one. Just trying to keep us on our toes.
I apologize. It was in the first on the thing. I'm sorry. I'll launch the. Want me to launch the first one, Steve?
Yes, please. Oh, good. Thank you. So that will give you about 30 seconds to kind of go through that and let us know what you used, and then we'll talk about what we see.
All right, I'll end the poll.
Thank you.
That's interesting. We actually have a pretty large number of 21C users, which is really good to see. Although we do have some folks here that are currently not using it all, that's just interesting. But yes, this is great. Sounds like a lot of people have moved forward to newer versions here. Great.
All right, great.
All right. So now we've taken a look at fundamental principles. We've been based on the poll, we see a wide variety of people using different versions of it or not familiar. So hopefully we can educate those that are not familiar or not using it today with it. But not, what we'd like to do right now is maybe take a look at what we see as some of the most traditional uses of standalone Essbase today. So, I'd like probably say that, we've been implementing Essbase for, hate to date ourselves, but, over 20 years at least. We've seen many solutions, and I'm sure you probably have seen many solutions out there yourselves. But Eric, with your experience, and would you mind just talking about where and how you see Essbase most often being used today?
Absolutely. So basically, the CFO's office is where we've seen it primarily rolled out. Mostly for financial consolidations, reporting, and forecasting. But when we talk about reporting, we're talking about the regulatory, we're talking about internal and external reporting. But yes, the focus has traditionally been in the CFO office.
All right, perfect. So maybe let's talk a little bit about some of the thoughts as to why we see the focus and concentration being on the office of the CFO.
Sure. So, obviously we've covered off on, the traditional uses of Essbase, and they're always in the CFO office. But why do you think, Steve, why do you think that's traditionally been the case?
Yeah, it's a good point, because I think if you look at the first two on the left-hand side, right, we started out with two companies. There was Hyperion, there was Arbor. Hyperion was traditional Hyperion focus was financial applications. So the obviously point into organizations was always finance, right? It was applications sold to finance people for finance people. And then in the middle, you had Arbor. So pre the Arbor Hyperion merger, Essbase competed with Hyperion applications, but also being OLAP technology and OLAP engine itself, it was deployed a lot more broadly. So pre the merger, Essbase did a lot more than just what we see in the office of the CFO. So I think that was part of it. When the two organizations joined, it kind of went through the same sort of a focus. Hyperion being finance was the entry point into organization. I think that's kind of how it started and how it seemed to have grown, Eric.
Obviously, yeah. And then what do you think about the Oracle acquisition of Hyperion? Do you think that also has something to do with it?
Yeah, my opinion only, but I think when Oracle then acquired Hyperion, there was that period of, well, Essbase was underlying technology for all the Hyperion applications, right? It was behind the scenes for planning. It then went behind the scenes for all the SaaS cloud applications as the back end. It kind of become more of a commodity embedded technology. And I think it somewhat got lost as a standalone solution. It was considered an application, then it was considered a database. So I do think that it sort of lost its way along the way, but I do think with the introduction of Essbase 21C right now, that it's back where there's a focus on Essbase as its own standalone technology, and I think you'll start seeing a lot more being done with it now. All right, and that takes us to our next polling question. So what areas in your organization do you currently see Essbase being used, assuming you do use it in your organization? So I'll give you about 30 seconds and then we'll close the poll and we'll talk and see what you guys see.
All right, 5 more seconds. We'll end the poll.
Oh yeah, no surprise here. Obviously, FP&A, internal management reporting for sure. Regulatory reporting, consolidations. Although yes, it's interesting. There is some sales and marketing in here too, which is going to be very interesting to see what's actually going on in those two particular elements. Cool.
Yeah, I agree. It's pretty interesting. It actually hits on just about everything you touched upon with the Office of the CFO and traditional uses. So appreciate everybody taking the time. All right, so now for the next little bit, or the next several minutes, I would say, we want to talk about examples and use cases that we have seen that were technically outside of the office of the CFO. And like I said, I'm sure you guys have some as well, but we wanted to touch on a couple that we had. So, Eric, do you want to kind of take us through the first use case?
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll talk through a couple of examples that we have of non-financial Essbase applications that we've either built in the past or have been exposed to. So the first one is point of sales. This particular one I've been involved with on a couple of different deployments over the years. So yeah.
Okay, so I know we all shop and we all know about those many credit card swipes that we go through. So what have you seen with that kind of data that's been collected then, Eric?
Sure, absolutely. Applications that are built to review data like this, they typically get feeds from retail terminals in individual store locations. But from that, you can actually gather financial data about micro and macro trends that are occurring in a store or in a particular area around a store.
Oh, interesting. So what have you seen clients using that data for then, Eric?
Well, some interesting examples are like donut sales or coffee sales near hospitals when a shift changes, or Friday purchases of car washing supplies, right? Even things like soup sales on like a rainy day.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember talking to someone here too. They said, spikes of donut sales at certain times of the day or night, and the first logical choice is that we could all come up with a whole lot of reasons why there'd be a spike in the middle of the night. But interesting. So what else do you see as the impact on like building these kind of applications in within Essbase?
Sure. So you need dimensions with attributes to correlate to product times or smart lists to capture unique events like rain or a heat wave or things like that. So you can gather additional information to further tie that data to a change or some sort of a macro trend or a micro trend.
All right, interesting. So I guess then beyond the obvious, then what have you seen clients do or other uses of this type of data that they've collected as well then too?
So one of the things that I've seen is a store reorganization by day. So I know one of the examples that we gave earlier was the car washing supplies, but what you can do is move a sales gondola with car washing supplies from the back of a store to the front of a store starting on a Friday. There's other things like weather events, for instance, right? You may want to turn off the soup heating elements on days that are really, really hot, things like that.
All right, interesting. So hopefully that gave some idea to folks out there of one use case that we've seen in the past. And let's move on to the next one. And Eric, you want to walk us through this one too?
Sure, absolutely. Staffing forecasting. This is another one that I've worked on in the past. It's basically used in service industries where employees perform various billable services.
Okay, so like a healthcare setting, or possibly even attorneys, or I guess technically even service orgs like us.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the healthcare setting is really the one that you see a lot of, right? So, certain levels of doctors, nurses, support personnel are necessary to keep things moving along, smoothly during the day, and obviously at a reasonable cost, right? So, applications through data collection, they can begin to forecast ratios of personnel to services, and those ratios can be tweaked over time to forecast the proper employee levels.
Oh, interesting. So then again, what you touched upon a few, but like what are the unique pieces that you would put into an Essbase app for addressing this kind of need?
All right. Well, one of the things that you typically see here is a more detailed time dimension, or even whole separate dimensions for time of time during the day that's obviously less than a day, like a 24-hour period. So things like a clock dimension that may have like hours or even minutes in it.
Okay, probably similar, just like the POC when you're POS, when you're talking about sales at that. Okay, interesting. All right. Let's walk on to the third one. It's about marketing campaigns, and I know everyone advertises, and depends on these kind of campaigns. So, I'm sure there's tons of data that comes through, and the whole goal is try to figure out what all that tons of data is doing for them. So, what have you seen with these kind of applications then, Eric?
Sure, absolutely. So with the rollout of a marketing campaign that brings in all kinds of new data that could be useful for potentially future campaigns, right? So the one thing you want to make sure you keep track of is certain communication channels that are required for various levels, right, of resources. So social media, for instance, has lower upfront costs compared to like a produced television advertisement. And I mean, the results from each are very different.
Okay, interesting. So, and I guess similar to this one, then, what do you see when you're building an Essbase app? People probably be interested is like, what do you see as the unique considerations or configurations for marketing campaign analytics within Essbase?
Absolutely. So obviously you have like a customer, a product dimension, but also like a media channel, right? Like the television, social media, etc. So teasing out the relationships between those three dimensions, they can come up with some really great metrics that we can use to do some forecasting.
All right. So then, obviously from that, lessons learned, one campaign, successful, unsuccessful. What have you learned, and how can that use that for future campaigns then?
Absolutely. So, this is really where multidimensional analysis really shines, right? So, you could then come up with metrics from an opening campaign and apply those to a new campaign. Or if there's a secondary push in there, you can see where you did particularly well in what particular media channel.
All right, interesting. Appreciate it. Thanks, Eric. Let's move on to the next one then on inventory unit
Sure.
forecasting.
So on this one here, it's sort of a riff on the earlier point of sales discussion. But from here, you can take data from like the retail locations that we talked about earlier, like the terminals, right? And merge that with vendor delivery data to forecast, the inventory.
Sounds like it would be a different internal customer then.
Sure, but I actually think it's more than just one customer. I think it's a lot of customers, right? So obviously you've got your inventory managers. That's the one that stands out. But the other thing is the other people that really like it are project buyers or product buyers, right? So the first, they want to basically follow the merchandise through the internal supply chain, right? And they can see for those, the large volume buys or whatever. And with that, they can then take the information and go back to vendors and try to negotiate better contracts.
Yeah, I could see how that could be, all that information could be super useful. Appreciate it. Thanks, Eric.
So the next example that we have is the cooperative accounting. And this one's pretty case specific. And it shows how a really heavily Excel-based process can be solved using Essbase. And I know, Steve, you have some experience with this.
Yeah, so we had a client that was a cooperative. So as such, they had to meet several requirements, not only the corporate perspective, bankers, board owners, things of that, but also the members. So things like contribution to financial consolidations and more. So it was complicated. It met a lot of requirements.
Cool. So sounds like a lot of like linked Excel spreadsheets, probably formulas, hard-coded numbers, all that kind of stuff.
Yep. You can only imagine. I kind of refer to it as your typical Excel nightmare in a standalone Excel environment. Linked sheets, calculations, formulas, hard-coded numbers in the middle of somewhere. It was I wouldn't say it was quite a bit of work maintaining it standalone. So the application that we actually built touched on actually a lot of the previous examples that you talked about, Eric, like point of sales, right? We had point of sales data coming in to help the rolling forecast process. We had inventory, keeping track of things like growing season and inventory. It's kind of pretty much the FIFO method of accounting. So first in, first out. We had opening inventory, we had additions, we had returns for sales. We kept track of that within the application. So we could tell when, a current year's inventory or crop was completely sold off. The process was complicated then by the fact that, in year one, you have 1 year, right? Year two, you could still be selling what was left over from year one. You collected what's in year two, you're selling both and potentially more. So it just got more complicated as it went along. So it was an interesting application.
Cool. And what actually was the key result of building the app?
So the main goal at the end of the day for this, then Eric, was to calculate, since it was a co-op, was to calculate how much each member receive for their contribution to each one of these growing seasons, right? So they were paid something nominally upfront when things were collected. And during the year, they received estimated payments. And the estimated payments were based on the monthly forecast, which were very detailed down to SKU. So the forecast process was incredibly detailed, all done within Essbase. And the payments were calculated based on that. And then at the end of the year, there was a true up. So you can imagine the forecast process, there were a lot of eyes on it. It had to be very accurate because the last thing you really wanted to do at the end of the season was, I paid you X throughout the year based on forecast. And at the end of the year, it's like, man, we goofed. You kind of owe us money. So the forecast, there was a lot of pressure. At the end of the year, the last payment was just supposed to be a true up. And you never wanted to get into the case where you said, hey, you may owe us money back. So but that was the key thing, was calculating how much each member got paid for each of the growing seasons.
Interesting. I had something very similar at a water company that had to consolidate data from a number of like small well operators. So basically mom and pop operations with their own unique accounting systems, own unique data collection systems, and having to get those figures consolidated up into a more corporate app. So very similar.
Right. And again, like you mentioned earlier, I think the key here, since it's not applicable to everyone, I think the takeaway was that it was a very manual process being done in an organization. So when you start thinking about very manual, intensive, Excel-based standalone processes, they lend themselves very easily to a solution to Essbase. So that was the goal here. It was a specific one, but it kind of opens up your eyes to things that you may be doing similar in your own organization. So thanks for that one, Eric. Appreciate it.
Sure.
All right, that kind of takes us then to our final polling question. Is that, can you visualize how Essbase can be used and may be used in other areas of your organization? And again, we'll leave it up for about 30 seconds and then we'll talk about what we see.
All right, a few more seconds and I'll close the poll.
That's what we want to see. Definitely, we want to see people thinking about this.
Exactly. We were hoping.
Oh, that's good to see. Yep.
All right. So I'd say that, hopefully what we had discussed some of our examples provided with some food for thought. The polls results seem to show that there is definitely an interest in, growing how Essbase is deployed.
Absolutely. So Steve, if a client is considering deploying Essbase more broadly throughout the organization, what have you found that really helps?
Yeah, good question. And this probably should touch on maybe some of the folks that are actually on the call, but I think the big thing with any implementation or deployment, if you think about it, is adoption, right? So you can build the best of anything. You can build the best race car, best rocket, best can opener, car, whatever it is. But if people don't use it, you'd probably say it really wasn't very successful. So adoption is really key. So you got to actually build something that was, that people wanted, and it served the purpose that they intended it to be. So to that, and I always found that identifying someone at the client who became the champion was key. So, someone's going to step up and kind of become the de facto champion. Then you work and you foster that relationship. So I always found that, when you start talking to other people's within the organization, that if it's coming from someone from within the organization, they're more, inclined to listen to it, as opposed to it coming from someone from from us, but coming from one of their own. And then secondly, I always found that, you know, you're keeping the right people in the loop throughout. So you kind of create communication plans. You have steering committee meetings. The goal of all those is communication as to what was going on, what was successful, how it was successful, pitfalls, how to avoid them, but to extend it to others outside the project team, so that as when other needs popped up, there were people who were already familiar with, already heard of it, or familiar with the successes, and it just made it a whole lot easier. So how about you, Eric? What have you found to work on your end?
Absolutely. So, obviously find a current success within the organization, and then use that as, your standard to carry it through to other areas. I mean, obviously your champion concept is key here, right? Where people see success in one area, they definitely want to replicate it.
All right, perfect. Sounds good. We're on the same page. So appreciate that. Thanks, Eric. So with that, we definitely want to thank everyone for being on our webinar. We hope that we achieve what we set out to. We hope that you gain some information on Essbase. And I guess we have a couple minutes left, so we probably want to see if there's any questions that have popped up in the chat. Well, we have a couple seconds here. So question here, of the non-financial use cases we presented, which one do you see most often? Eric, you want to take that one?
Sure. So I think point of sales is probably the one we see the most of, because it really does dovetail that financial data with, like product data and, unit sales. So it definitely integrates. And again, obviously, it's got to be more of a retail organization, but I think point of sales is where we're seeing it the most.
All right, perfect. We have another one. What do you see happening with Essbase or EPM upgrades? Are customers moving to a new version? Is it a difficult upgrade process? I'll take this one. You could chime in too a little bit, Eric. So we're actually seeing a lot of movement on Essbase right now with the introduction of 21C. There's still a lot of clients on older releases, so we do see a lot of people upgrading. We saw a lot of people upgrading on premise. We see a lot of people upgrading, moving to OCI, and getting out of the data center business. We see people going to 21C. We see people going across the board, going to the latest EPM stack release with, the most recent releases have 21C underneath it. So we see a lot of activity of people moving up to the latest releases in all sorts of arenas. It is not a very difficult upgrade process. We found we've done plenty of them and have a lot of more up on our tap. So hopefully that answered that question for those who put out there. But there's a lot of activity, and a lot of people upgrading right now. Another question: are you available to demo some of our samples of some of the use cases that we had? We certainly would be available to talk to them and show with them. So if there's definitely an interest, please get back to myself or Joe, and we'd be more than happy to reach out and talk to you about that. The last question that we have here is Essbase available as a SaaS offering? And so right now we don't see a SaaS offering, SaaS cloud. We do see Oracle 21C being offered standalone, being offered in OCI. It is part of the EPM stack embedded in the technologies of planning, et cetera, on the back end. But as far as like a standalone SaaS cloud application. We don't see that just yet, a clear one. And I think that's all the questions that we have at this point. If there's another question that you want to have, you could always send it to a response to the recording. We will be sending out the recording. We'll send out the questions and the answers again to everyone who's participating. We again want to thank you for taking part in the webinar today. We do hope that you received and got some good information about it, and we're more than happy to talk to you if questions come up. We do see with the introduction of 21C, the possibilities being limitless for Essbase. You combine that with all of the traditional Oracle tools, as well as the power of other products like Dodeca, that the sky is the limit with Essbase again. So please reach out to us if you have any questions, and we appreciate your time. Eric, anything you want to add?
No, I think that'll be all. Yeah.
All right. Thanks again. And we will be sending out a recording shortly. Appreciate everybody's time today, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you much.
Thank you.